Good morning to you. This is Sunrise. Top stories today. Failed fire safety tests on tower blocks across the country. The government says all 34 high-rise buildings tested so far failed those tests as thousands evacuated in North London spent a second night in temporary accommodation. There's more pressure for Theresa May as the Archbishop of Canterbury calls for a cross-party commission to deal with Brexit. And we're not dinosaurs. The leader of the DUP in Westminster says critics of the party shouldn't fear its influence on government.
Also this morning on Sunrise, Moscow's pin-up pensioners, the modelling agency helping to shake up the conservative world of Russian fashion. And in sport, after defeat to the All Blacks, the Lions consider their options for Tuesday's tour match.
Well, thanks for joining us on Sunrise this morning. We're starting with news about the tower blocks and the tests that are being carried out. The government says that all 34 high-rise blocks that have been tested right across the country in the light of the Grenfell Tower disaster have failed the fire safety tests. Communities Secretary Sajid Javid made the announcement as around 3,000 people from the Chalcots estate in North London spent a second night in temporary accommodation. 4 of the towers there were evacuated on Friday night. Criticism of Camden Council's handling of that situation continues today, and some people are still refusing to leave their homes. Laura Bundock reports.
Carrying bags and belongings, residents from the evacuated towers gradually moved out.
OK, thanks, Phil.
Now, the Archbishop of Canterbury has added to the pressure on the Prime Minister, calling Theresa May to set up a cross-party commission to advise her on Brexit.
Justin Welby's compared the current situation to the world wars when Britain was run by coalitions and says a cross-party approach would take some of what he called the poison out of the debate.
Well, let's cross live to Westminster now, and our correspondent Charlotte Lomas. And Charlotte, I think this is going to cause a bit of controversy, or at least a bit of a stir, isn't it?
Well, Rebecca, it's bound to infuriate some Conservatives on the Queen's speech. OK,
Charlotte, thanks very much for that.
Now, the DUP's leader in Westminster says those who hold different views on social issues like gay marriage and abortion have no reason to fear the party's influence on the government.
Well, yes, Nigel Dodds, who's been negotiating a confidence and supply agreement with Downing Street, has told Sky News he and his colleagues had been misrepresented as dinosaurs. He's been speaking to our Ireland correspondent, David Blevins.
With the vote on the Queen's speech looming, all eyes were back on the Kingmakers. David Blevins, Sky News in Belfast.
Sophie Ridge is here at 10 o'clock and she's going to be talking to the former Chancellor, Ken Clarke, the International Development Secretary, Priti Patel, Labour MP Stella Creasy and Labour peer, Shami Chakrabarti.
Now, more than 120 people have been killed in an oil explosion tanker in Pakistan. Officials say the tanker overturned on a highway and exploded as people tried to collect the leaking oil. Another 80 people were injured.
118 people are still missing after a village in southwest China was buried by a huge landslide. Only 3 survivors have been found so far. 15 bodies have been recovered. Heavy rain caused the side of a mountain to collapse yesterday morning.
The government has announced that duty-free imports to the UK from developing countries will be maintained after Brexit. 48 countries, including Bangladesh, Haiti and Ethiopia, will continue to benefit from the arrangements on all goods bought to the UK, but that's excluding weapons. Goods worth £20 billion are shipped to the UK from these countries every year.
Not every dog is beautiful, apparently. So if you have got a really ugly mutt, then why not make money out of them? That's the view of those people organising the world's ugliest dog competition in California. There were entries from across the globe. Only 14, though, to be fair. 1 from Wales. There's a prize of £1,200 for the winner, as well as media appearances in New York. Woo.
You never know, they might let your cat in next year.
My cat's beautiful. Thank you very much. Do you know what? Although I think every animal is beautiful, I think I have a fundamental issue with this. I've got to say, this is the winner, Neapolitan Mastiff Martha, a rescue dog. She wowed the judges with her laziness and complete lack of interest. Good for her.
Oh, I think she's rather sweet, isn't she?
Yeah. I just, well, I mean, it's all a bit of fun, but something about it grates a little bit.
Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
I think so.
Oh, look at those
As long as they give you a bit of a slobber and a...
I think that one definitely would.
Yeah.
Those lips look pretty dangerous.
It's all good. It's all good. You know what that means? It means the pet pictures are going to be heading in our way this morning on Twitter.
Oh dear, danger.
No, it's all
Send them
good.
in. I love a
Good.
cat picture especially.
Oh, yes.
Crazy cat ones.
Now, we've been talking this morning about the potential for blackmail. Whether that would happen or not, I don't know. Government ministers and MPs, because there's been a prolonged cyber attack on Parliament, trying to get into the emails accounts of MPs, of peers and of their staff. Let's talk to Greg Sim, Chief Executive of Cybersecurity Glasswall Solutions, who's here. Good to see you, as always, Greg. What do we know, if anything, about this attack so far?
Well, we think up to now it's an attempt. And of course, as we've said many times before, the attempts are really quite easy for these guys. You know, they're going to go into information that's already out there, especially these accounts that have been hacked before, LinkedIn, Twitter, Dropbox, loads of them, millions of them. And you can access that information. You can then start to send or go into these accounts, because the chances are a lot of people haven't changed the passwords. So if you've not changed your passwords, I'm going to go into your account, and then I'm going to start sending emails around. That's a beachhead.
But you would think the government's better protected, wouldn't you?
You can't. Sometimes it's not so much the government, it's more about the individuals. You know, old saying in the insurance world, you can't insure against stupidity sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's a fact. You know, so if you don't change your password, or you don't have that authentication, so the chance of what's happened is National Cyber Security Centre especially might have just said, stop, let's just be careful here, turn it off, which is a drastic measure in itself, but they've done it hopefully to protect the data.
Yeah, well, and it has to be said, and from people I know who were telling me about this yesterday morning, actually, nothing actually seems to have happened. People's accounts have been protected. I know that laptops were sort of shut down for a period of time. Access from laptops and access from phones and tablets still isn't available. I guess they're more that they have less encryption on them, do they?
Well, yeah, it's not so much about encryption. You've got to put yourself in the shoes of your adversary. He's just going to prod and poke until he finds a hole. You know, and as I said, the easy hole is through people not keeping things up to date, not changing passwords, opening email attachments that are suspicious. You know, we've spoken again about this before.
Do you know, and they're relentless now, aren't they?
All the time, all the time. And remember, you've got the degrees of ones that are very obvious into the ones, if they've got into your LinkedIn account, they're going to send it to your network of people with, say, with a Microsoft Word document. All they want you to do is open it, the payload's in there, and they're in.
They were saying that the fact that it happened late on a Friday evening was actually a blessing in disguise, because it meant it wasn't quite so serious, because everyone had already gone home.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, you could look at the other way around, that maybe they're looking at the point that somebody on a Friday night is just going to open that link or open that attachment, and then all they want to do is create that beachhead and then start to filter around through everybody that they can.
But are things changing in the sense that with this, from what we can gather, this has been stopped by the IT system security people at Westminster, and companies are taking things more seriously now, aren't they? I mean, certainly security here online has been upped recently, pretty severely. Yeah. We are becoming more aware of things, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, we are, and every company has got to take it ultra seriously, because these are real, and the damage, from reputational damage to financial damage, is huge. So organisations and people in organisations are getting more education, but at the end of the day, people still click on things.
Yeah, Greg, good to see you. The man with the best surname for the job, Greg Sim. I mean, it's just perfect. It's real, is it?
Well, no, it's an M at the end, not an N.
Good to see you.
We'll pretend.
Thanks, man.
Right, meanwhile, a photographer is capitalising on a gap in Russia's fashion industry, and that's by setting up a modelling agency for senior citizens.
Yeah, it's a country that normally associates beauty with youth. I guess most countries do that in a way, don't they? The company has more clients and models, that's good. The youngest of those models is in her 60s. Our Russia correspondent John Sparks reports.
Start with the hair, follow with the makeup. The clothes and accessories come next.
Lovely. Lots more still to come for you.
Welcome back. Should we take a look at the sport now?
Joe's got the weather for us this morning. Is summer officially over?
No, I don't think so, but you might think so for the next week or so. It's looking rather unsettled. And certainly today, we've still got a lot of warm air in the south, but the north rather chilly.
Well, a very good morning to you. This is Sunrise. Now, our main news today is the government saying all 34 high-rise blocks that have been tested across the country so far in the light of the disaster at Grenfell Tower, the tragedy there, have failed fire safety tests.
Well, Communities Secretary Sajid Javid made the announcement as around 3,000 residents of the Chilcots estate in North London spent a second night in temporary accommodation. 4 of those towers there were evacuated on Friday evening.
Well, criticism of Camden Council's handling of the situation continues. Some people are still refusing to leave their homes. But it opens up some very big political questions, of course, as to, A, how this has been handled and how we're going to move forward on this issue. So let's talk to the former Business Secretary, Sir Vince Cable, who's here. Good to see you, Sir Vince, as always. Can we look at the response that we've had so far? I mean, both on a local government and on a central government perspective on this. What's your take on what we've seen so far?
Well, I think if we go beyond the grief and anger of the victims, and that's still a very raw issue, but into some of the bigger issues, I mean, the thing that emerges is the very casual way that government in recent years has just treated fire safety. We've seen this in all kinds of ways. The cladding that was there entirely for cosmetic reasons had no benefits for the residents. The stuff that's emerged this morning about how sprinklers, which really should be in buildings following the 2012 coroner's inquiry, they were going to be shelved in schools, for example. I mean, a whole set of things which suggested that fire safety just wasn't given the seriousness that it deserved.
But is there an indication, because this is where it gets complicated, and we know that the rules and regulations are going to have to be looked at because it's very confusing at the moment. Have things got worse, or have they always been bad and we're just now in the light of a tragedy coming across?
Well, I think what's happened, we've had a whole series of very serious fires. I mean, Shepherd's Bush was the last one. Very clear conclusions came out of them, and they were just never followed through. I think one of the other big stories that's emerged is about how we treat this financially. There's potentially enormous amount of money involved. I mean, the government has now agreed that the emergency costs should be spread across the country, which is what you do in flooding. But there are other lessons from the past that we should be applying. What about the individuals who are taken out of their homes for long periods of time? Should they not be given a council tax rebate? I mean, the practical things like this that we've learnt from the floods, which you should now be beginning to apply.
Well, I mean, I spoke to Sajid Javid yesterday and said, is the government effectively writing a blank cheque here? Now, he wouldn't say, because obviously we don't know at this stage what the costs are going to be, but that's ultimately what it's going to boil down to, isn't it?
Well, it's not a blank cheque, but no, safety comes first. It must come first. And, there are so many little corners of being cut in the past. I saw the report a couple of days ago from the fire chief in London that they haven't, for example, got the fire engines of the quality and reach that they have in other areas like Surrey in London. They can't reach the top stories, and why this happened, presumably, lack of money for modernising their systems. But I think overall just a lack of focus on fire safety, and it's often very mundane practical things, but making sure that fire engines have access to power points, making sure that local authorities take parking restrictions seriously so fire engines aren't blocked. So they're not big dramatic things, but it is partly about money. It's just being conscious of fire safety as a massive overriding issue.
OK. Well, I know this investigation and this inquiry is going to happen. There's going to be a lot of questions that need answering in all of this. Can we talk Brexit? Because, as you'd be aware, the Archbishop of Canterbury has said now, there needs to be a cross-party coalition on Brexit. Is that a sensible idea?
Well, there has to be a lot of cross-party discussion, and this is beginning to happen in Parliament. I came back after 2 years, and the mood amongst MPs, I meet quite a few Labour, Tory MPs, is that we're in a mess, the country's in a mess, because we can't just proceed on the current basis. There's no mandate now for the very hard extreme form of Brexit that Theresa May was committed to. We've got to talk together about finding compromise solutions.
Isn't that what was voted for? I mean, the 52%, weren't they voting to get out of the EU, to get out of the single market, to get out of the currency union, which is now being rowed back on? Isn't that what people actually voted for? Isn't the mandate there through that?
Well, not the currency union, because we weren't in it, but the customs union. I mean, I don't remember the customs union being mentioned in the referendum. It's quite a technically complex thing.
Yeah.
But what's happened is that once the yes vote went through, it was assumed that the 52% had 100% obligations over everybody else, and the wider concerns of the minority were neglected. And a lot of the technical issues around the single market, the customs union, were just not thought through. I mean, the customs union is a very good example. It was never debated at the time. It's absolutely fundamental for your big supply chain industries like aerospace, the car industry, and sacrificing those for some kind of theoretical benefit of potentially having trade agreements 10 years' time with a few countries. I mean, it makes absolutely no sense. And I think what Parliament, the mood now, not just in Parliament but in the country, is to try and rethink these issues. And it is going to require cross-party discussion of a sensible, grown-up, mature kind.
But in terms of Justin Welby saying, this is a similar situation to the 2 world wars, which is what he said, I mean, that surely cannot be the right comparison to make. And indeed, should we be hearing from someone who is not an elected official in this country making these sort of demands?
Well, we're not talking about killing people, and in that sense, the analogy with war is not right. But in terms of the sheer scale of what was involved, I mean, we're talking about years and years of Parliament being tied up with this issue, and a lot of very, very big concerns which are connected with our long-term future. You know, how do we make the economy more productive so that we can raise wages? I mean, this has all been shelved. You know, we're not talking any longer about, how do we raise the skill level of the population? How do we get more science and innovation? That's what we should be focusing on. It's all been put in the background because of the overriding preoccupation with Brexit, and that is very unhealthy.
Okay. Final thought, because we're out of time and I'm being told off.
Fine.
But you're the only candidate so far to be the new leader of the Lib Dems. And forgive me for highlighting it again, but at 74, and presumably that would mean you'd want to stay on until the election in 2022, if that's when it is.
Yeah.
Would you want to lead a party into a general election at 79?
Well, you are forgiven, yeah.
Well,
yes, I'm up for it. I've got, age is what you feel. It's not what's there on the calendar. I've got plenty of energy, enthusiasm, drive. I think that's what we need. And as I occasionally remind people, some of the great figures in British history, from Churchill to Gladstone, were operating at the highest level, and they were older than me.
That's a very fair point. Sir Vince, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed.
Now, how do police forces that are already stretched and subject to funding cuts cope with large-scale protests? 2 rival demonstrations took place in Birmingham yesterday, one by Britain First and one by Unite Against Fascism. Tom Parmenter was given rare access to West Midlands Police's Silver Command and to officers on the ground.
Sky News, Birmingham.
Okay, let's have a look through the papers once again for you this morning with the writer and columnist Christina Patterson and radio host James Whale. Let's kick straight off with the Mail on Sunday. I want it out, says Prince Harry.
Yes, well, this is a big stir about an interview he gave. I think it was in Newsweek earlier this week, and then the Mail splashed, the Daily Mail splashed with a headline along the lines of, shock horror, Harry doesn't want to be king. I have a lot of sympathy for Harry. He's actually my favourite member of the royal family because I think he's fun and he is nice and he likes to have a laugh, and I think he's a good guy, and he was, a child when his mother died, and that's very tough to be living with that grief in front of the eyes of the media and the nation. And he's just saying what is kind of obviously the fact, that being monarch is a pretty tough gig. The Queen has this extraordinary sense of duty, and she's done the job magnificently. I'm not particularly a royalist, I'm not a Republican either, but I think we couldn't have done better than her. And I think Harry has been inspired by her example of duty, and he's basically saying, look, we'll do our duty, but don't think any of us are rushing to do it because it's not much fun.
Yeah. It's a valid point, isn't it? I mean, it's being
I
very...
nearly agree with that.
I mean, he wears his heart on his sleeve, doesn't he? That's why lots of people like
but I'm a big
But does he
royalist.
say too much?
I think they're great. And what he said, if you read the article, which obviously the person who wrote the front page of the Mail didn't, you know, he basically was saying what a lot of people know. If you wanted that sort of job, you'd be completely wrong for it, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I think that's a very valid point, actually. I like him. There's something about him which is
very lovable about him. Very lovable.
And if we didn't have them, we'd have to have an elected president,
exactly.
and they'd be...
You'd end up with a
He seems very down to earth, doesn't he?
Yes, exactly. And a laugh, for God's sake, you know.
Let's have a look at this in the Sunday.
He might ring you up later.
I hope so. That'd be lovely.
Sunday People, James. What a shocking picture, actually.
You know, I sort of, I take the mick out of a lot of things, and we're going on about how terrible it is, and might talk a little bit about Justin Welby and what he thinks earlier. You know, we haven't got any problems in this country compared with what's going on in the Middle East, have we? And sadly, this is continuing to go on, and it's not front page news anymore here, is it? And people are still dying in their thousands. And children and families are, and this is the biggest thing that Europe should be apologising, including us when I say Europe, that we have failed the people to look after those people. We should have given them a safe haven in Syria or in Iraq, or we should have helped them flee rather than say, we don't want them over here, send them over there. I mean, fancy, what would have happened if our parents had done the same thing in the Second World War to the Jews? What would have happened? This is the biggest tragedy the world has seen for a long time, and we have all failed to do anything about it. I'm just disgusted.
We have. I went to the Za'atari refugee camp last summer, and it was just heartbreaking. All these people who had escaped these terrible situations, and there were charities sort of encouraging these children to believe that they could, you know, have happy futures, but I think the likelihood is they'll be stuck in those refugee camps for years and years.
And you know, if you want to be cynical about it, you couldn't blame them, but they'll be the terrorists of tomorrow if we're not very careful, because of what they've seen as children growing up and how they've been behaved. Look, and if that child's face just sums it all up.
And what some of these young girls go through.
It's just
last year. It's heartbreaking.
Just awful. And the tragedy is in Syria. I've been to Syria twice. It was, you know, I absolutely loved it. I actually thought seriously about living in Damascus for 6 months and learning Arabic, because it was an incredibly civilized. Obviously, it had a dictator, Assad, which is clearly not ideal, but it also had the oldest alphabet in the world. You know, it's one of the oldest civilizations in the world. It's a very, very highly educated country. They used to spend more of their GDP on education than we do, and you look at it just reduced to rubble in this way. It's just heartbreaking.
And we've just abandoned them, really.
It's horrifying. Can we just have a look, because we're almost out of time, I want to tie in, Christina, your front of the Observer about soft Brexit, and James, your Sunday Mail and Sunday about Justin Welby, because that's all about Brexit as well. I mean, unions wanting a softer Brexit.
Well, I don't think the unions particularly know what they want, but Corbyn is now under pressure to encourage the unions to seek a soft... No, sorry, it's the other way around. The unions are now telling Labour to seek a soft Brexit, but the unions, to be fair, weren't doing that at the time of the referendum. I mean, the Labour position on Brexit was extremely confused and theoretically supporting Remain, but not really, because they knew that so many of the so-called Labour heartlands were very pro-Brexit.
Well, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn's effectively a Brexiteer.
Oh, he's definitely a Brexiteer, and he didn't campaign for Remain, or so sort of low in such a lukewarm way that he essentially campaigned for Brexit. So it's a mess. I mean, I hope we'll end up with a slightly softer Brexit than we would otherhammond have done, but the options aren't particularly good.
It's Conservatives have been pretty strong in saying that.
Yeah, it does. Look, it does, unless if Phil Hammond does become a caretaker Prime Minister. He is so keen on trying to give a softer Brexit, we may end up in a slightly better place.
Such a big if, though.
Yeah.
And we're out of time, Jez, but just because we mentioned this.
Well, Welby's warned May to draw. You see, I think the recent election, which was totally unnecessary and a waste of money that we can't afford, apparently, said that the people of this country are not as pro-Brexit as some people would have you believe. And maybe, I agree with the Bishop in this, maybe we need a grand coalition of all parties, perhaps, to sort this out, because this is going to be the future of, not for me or people of my age, but for younger people, and they are in danger of ruining this country and probably ruining a lot further afield, because once Europe does fall apart, it will affect all of us.
OK, well, your views on that, very welcome. On Twitter this morning, we're going to take a break. Back with more in just a moment. So we're looking through the papers with James and Christina. And James, we're going to have more for you, tell
well, this is the ongoing saga of television sound, really.
Mumbling.
Have you noticed, is it just me as well, that the levels go up and down like a yo-yo?
Is it the battery going?
No, it's not. And I don't have any aids, unlike yourself. So...
I haven't got any.
Oh, what's that stuck in your ear?
Oh, well, yeah.
Oh, right.
This is only to hear to my...
so your producer can yell and bark at you.
I do get fed up with people mumbling, though.
Do you?
Me too. I can't bear it.
But it never used to be like this, so... I haven't noticed it that much, but what I've noticed... What?
Well, I've never noticed it. I just wonder, is it the same type of thing of, when your parents start to say, we should speak up, you're always mumbling whenever you're on the phone?
I actually wrote a little rant about that in the Mail the other day about because I'm constantly I'm constantly having to get people to speak up. I don't know what it. Well, obviously I'm getting older and I'm going deaf, and people are shouting in the background and blah blah blah. But actually, I think there has been. I don't watch much. I haven't watched Poldark, but I have watched some of these kind of historic series where, for some kind of sense of authenticity, people are mumbling, and it is quite irritating, and you do end up, kind of desperately turning it up.
Well, I should be checking out these programmes to see. I've never noticed it, but you never know. We're out of time.
You're too young to notice that's why.
No, I just have my soundbar on full volume all the time. Good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Let's get a quick check on the sports headlines for you.